You are now listening to the Project Kuwait. Where we stop at nothing to bring you the right facts on health, fitness, and psychology. Featuring some of the world's most experienced professionals. So you can learn, live, and live. With your hosts, Meg, Dr. D, and Mehdi.
I have very rambunctious, active kids that want to pick on you and wrestle and punch each other, and they're just very much boys, and so that kind of energy, it gets really tiresome. Me and my wife have been getting pretty creative with how we've been dealing with that, and like kind of setting things up outside for them, like obstacle course wise. People need to consider repetitive pattern injuries and things that you constantly do all the time, will inevitably add up into dysfunction. It's just pure randomness. It's the funny part about being on the podcast and just letting it rip and not being like super organized and planned out. It allows for opportunities of just you to put out there whatever's on your mind. And so that was just like stream of consciousness, like, cup zero, like what? Nobody else calls it cup zero. Like in my own mind, like I feel like somebody's already said that. And it's like an idea that everybody like shares.
All this and more in today's episode.
So this is only fitting that I introduce our next guest, who is like, I don't know. I don't even know how to say it. I knew I'd fucking freeze up on this one, but Justin, don't you know that you're my hero? You're the wind beneath my wings.
Beneath my wings. I can fly higher than an eagle. Yeah. You are the wind beneath my wings.
Friggin' Justin from MindPump is on the frickin' show.
That's how you intro. I dig
dude.
You guys already. Yeah.
Oh,
that's
hell yeah,
That's how you should do that. Everybody avoids it. Yeah, it's funny because like I'll do stuff like that and everybody else looks at me like just like something happened, like dramatic, like, oh, how do we get out of this? Abort. And I'm like, no, go with it. Let's sing. Let's have fun. Yeah. So I appreciate that.
Dude, that's what makes MindPumps like so special to me is you guys don't go in it scripted, or at least that I know of, and it's just so natural and funny. I mean, before you guys said it all the time. You were the Howard Stern of podcasts, and you really are. Like, it's freaking awesome, man. So where did some of that come from you? I'm assuming it did.
In terms of like off the cuff kind of a stuff, like I definitely, that's my personality. I just kind of go with wherever the conversation is going to kind of take us. And initially we were leaning really hard on that. And so you're right. It's very much unscripted. It's whatever's on our mind, whatever's like out there being talked about, what we can kind of bring on to the show and discuss further. I think we all kind of had that in mind in terms of like what was not being discussed and what are people avoiding because they're scared to talk about it. And so those were like a lot of the things that we really brought initially when we started the podcast is like, how can we kind of shake things up and get people to sort of turn into a better direction and steer this thing so we don't have to always bring up the same topics and subjects with our clients. Like they're getting all this misinformation. It's frustrating. Like I was bringing a lot of that energy in of like being frustrated, and thankfully the guys were feeling the same thing. So it was pretty easy to pretty much vent the first, 100 episodes of just us like, hey man, everybody's doing this and this is really what you need to focus on. So yeah, that was a lot of the energy in the beginning, was real raw, real unscripted and off the cuff. If we offended you, then, I guess that's something that you're going to have to deal with. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, I think it's a good way to push away the people that probably don't vibe with your service and your brand, and to really bring in the ones that do. So when you have those kind of bold statements or things that might be a little bit offensive, I feel like Maddie always tries to add some of that in. But I think my favorite part of your guys is, I know you put out a ton of great information. The interview is obviously great, but I love like the 30 to 40 minute bullshit session at the beginning. It's just you guys just going back and forth.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I love that. That's my favorite. I just like chopping it up and seeing how everybody's mind works outside of them just giving me sort of a rehearsed version. Like, so if we bring somebody on the show too, it's that was a big struggle for us to really connect with with people coming on the show because they already have an agenda, something they want to accomplish by being on the show. And a lot of them would just give us this canned sort of response of, this is the way I think about it. This is my rhythm. And then every time I would try and jump in and say something that would kind of take them out of that rhythm, it was funny because they would hate me for that. Like I would not vibe well with some of these professionals, these doctors, these scientists. But that's just how it was for me, man. Like I went through the educational system and all the way through college, graduated, and was really bored through that entire process and just tried to make light of it amongst my friends and in the back. And so I was the one that they sent out of class like half the time because I was just so disruptive. Apparently that was a skill that I could make money off of. So thank God. Thank God for this platform where people appreciate it. Because before that, it was pretty much like it wasn't benefiting me much. So yeah, but again, like I don't even know where to go from here, but that was like mainly the frustration, but also like we started to feel that, okay, like this is part of the show. These are things that are actually adding entertainment value. These are like to be able to speak your mind and say something that might take somebody off a little bit. Like that's okay. Like the more honest, the more real, the more, authentic we can be, the better the show got. So that's pretty much what we've come to conclude.
Which is awesome, dude. I mean, I think that's when me and Meg sat down, we were like, yeah, because in Kuwait, everything's so PC. And in the Middle East in general, everything's PC. And I think we were probably one of the first people to ever swear on air. And, we went a little overboard at the beginning. And, yeah, we went way overboard.
Oh, yeah. No, I was just going to reiterate that because we for sure swore way more in the beginning. We'd actually drink a bit beforehand to calm the nerves. Like I was probably the most nervous because I'm not like into public speaking. I'm not into really sharing a lot of real hard opinions. So that was tough for me to kind of break through all that. But yeah, that's one of those things that when you're insecure, you're nervous, like a lot of the bad words would just fly out like every other word. Like it's real cringeworthy now kind of going back and listening to it. But I'm just glad that people stayed around to see us kind of work through that and then only added in for impact, like holding on to that a little bit more and not making that like the entire thing. So we're not really Howard Stern. Like we're not bringing strippers and, like all kinds of like madness in to the show, but we do try and lighten it up and have as much fun as possible for sure.
I'd say about 60% of our listeners don't know who Howard Stern is. To be honest with you.
Oh my God. Yeah. This happens to me every time I get like on an interview. It's like there's references for old 80s cartoons or whatever, like Mr. Belvedere or something. I think I like threw that out there and they're like, what the hell are you talking about?
Dude,
come on.
He's the shit, man.
Yeah, like come on, that's my childhood. So like I speak to it like everybody knows about it. But yeah, I'm finding out even more so now that it goes over everybody's head. So there you go.
Dude, how's the Corona situation over there for you guys? I mean, you got 2 kids, right? And you guys are out of school, I'm assuming. So how's that all going for you?
Yeah, I mean it's different. We're finding out as a family, just my family alone, that we had to change our habits up quite a bit. We were very much the family that would get out and go places, and we go to parks, we go, specific places, just like the beach and, out of the house. Like we got out of the house as much as possible. Like both kids were in 2 different sports. I was actually at the time I was coaching 2 little league teams. And so it was like all of a sudden now all that's cut off and we're all kind of confined to being inside at our house the whole time. And thankfully I have a pretty big backyard and I have some outlets for them to go out, climb on things and whatnot. But I have very rambunctious, active kids that want to pick on you and wrestle and punch each other. And, they're just very much boys. And so that kind of energy, it gets really tiresome after a while when there's no like outlet for them to really like expend that and get it out. And so, yeah, so me and my wife have been getting pretty creative with how we've been dealing with that and like kind of setting things up outside for them, like obstacle course wise, or I got my kids these bow and arrows. And so we're setting up targets for them and we're just trying to like get outside, do things that we can around the house. But this whole confinement thing has really mentally been difficult for my family specifically. So, yeah, that's pretty much the main feeling of it. Other than I don't necessarily think that we're super fearful of contracting the virus, and like we're going out and trying to be very cautious and mindful of like wearing gloves and masks where we need to. But it's just, I'm trying on the other side of it too, not to let it dictate how I live my life as well. So
yeah, it's a hard balance right now. I know Maddie out there, he's in Kuwait. They're on a pretty much a shutdown. Maddie, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. I didn't know.
I was waiting.
I thought it cut out for a second, so I was like,
it did for
he was just mesmerized. Yeah.
Thought I heard it.
We're on strict curfew from 5 to 6 a.m., 5 p.m. to 6 a.m. And you get caught outside, It's like a $30,000 fine, jail. Like they're pretty serious over here, which.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They need to be, though. They need to be. We have a very large expat worker population where the education level really isn't there. And it's just now it's starting to spread through that community. And they're really trying to like buckle it down because we don't have the medical system to handle it. I don't think anybody does, to be honest with you. So,
yeah, but that's the big concern is like trying not to get like an influx of patients in the hospitals. And yeah, this was another thing that was my wife and I talk about quite a bit because she was a pediatric nurse and just recently had retired and had kind of shifted to now be a stay-at-home mom. And I was just thinking, oh my God, like what madness that would have been, with her in that environment and then coming home and then like just the uncertainty of that and the exposure and then also having to be around the clock working. Like a lot of her coworkers are really going through it right now. They're in the hospital trying to help out as much as possible. So I feel for the health workers like going through this and like being exposed on a daily basis. It's pretty rough out there.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. It's a scary situation, but hopefully we'll all get through it, I mean, as long as everyone's got their home gyms, I'm sure they can take their mind off of it. So
right. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I think there was a meme floating around. It was like the ultimate status symbol right now is home gym, like having a squat rack at home. And I'm like, that's pretty freaking accurate.
Yeah, you got a home gym and you got a stack of toilet paper. I mean, you're the king at this point. So yeah, it's weird and you can't get it anywhere like weights and they're just out of stock. And I would have never anticipated, this was like going to affect and especially going to affect the fitness industry in general. I don't think anybody sort of anticipated something like this coming through. So we've been discussing this a lot in terms of like gyms, gym owners, the entire fitness landscape, like how this is going to affect everything. It's just going to change everything.
Well, I kind of want to talk to you about that. Like what changes do you hope to see come out of it? Because I know how you guys, I think, generally feel about the group fitness class model and what that, like it used to be, PTs and trainers being able to make a pretty decent living and income with that. And then group fitness kind of became the thing. And here it's like, we'll get people to pay one flat membership and then we pay our trainers, bottom dollar for the thing. So I guess like, what do you hope to kind of see come out of this or after this, as far as like those models go for gym ownership or trainers in general?
Yeah, I obviously hope that things turn around, quickly and people are able to save like their gym business any way they can. I know it's going to look different. So, I mean, I think the best thing they can do is to really show people how proactive they are in terms of like having, a sterile environment and, being able to kind of like show people how aggressively like they're going to make sure that the cleanliness and the upkeep and the distancing between machines and all that kind of stuff will play a factor. It's going to be hard because people are going to have all these uncertainties coming back in any kind of a group, even if it's like 20 people. So I definitely think that it's going to take a massive hit, and it'll be interesting to see how people can pivot and create something else for people to also have as another option. So I don't really know. I don't have any kind of like answers of like what, other than like the virtual side of things. It's great as a supplemental revenue source. And I think that if trainers are smart right now, they're putting a lot of effort into their education and educating their clients and getting more specifically individually like addressing their needs and kind of helping them from afar. So if they can do any more specific nutritional counseling, do virtual assessments, take them through like mobility, things that they can do and repeat these things in the comfort of their own house. That's going to be real beneficial. Doing mobile training. So maybe that's like an option for some of these trainers to just take their business on the road and kind of go to them so they can avoid crowds. But honestly, I don't see the big box gym doing very well for the next couple years. I see in group training by itself, I think will look a little bit different. Like, I don't necessarily know what that looks like. Maybe just less, like maybe it's like 10 instead of 20 people, but they're all a little bit more spread out. It's going to be in the back of everybody's mind. So using this time to really think about that, like how can you provide a good, safe experience and attract people to get back, because fitness is essential. Like this is one of these tools we have to keep ourselves from really like feeling a lot of the effect of, even if you do catch the virus, like being able to resist, a lot of the symptoms. They're showing like how vital, staying strong and fit is a huge factor to that. So it's definitely essential. Now it's a matter of like what that looks like. I'm uncertain. I don't know. Do you guys have any speculation what you think is going to transpire after this?
I just think it's definitely a chance for, like you said, trainers to start investing in themselves a little bit more of how they can. But for a lot of them, I think that we're getting burnt out is probably a good opportunity for them to turn around and kind of take some of their own health advice and invest in themselves a little bit more. But also like the education that you talked about. Yeah, I think it's going to weed out probably a lot of people that have that entrepreneur mindset. And that really can make a difference with people that are motivated to make a big difference with people and be able to powerfully put their messages and services out there to a broader scope.
I think people over here in Kuwait, I think whatever gym can weather out the storm right now is going to make the biggest difference, especially because right now I know a lot of gyms are letting go of people. Like they cut their salaries in half for the first 2 months. And then they said, you know what, if we don't get anything from the government, if the government doesn't give us, something to kind of hold us over, then we're going to have to let you guys go. And I definitely know 3 trainers that have already been let go, and it's going to be tough. And I think the gyms here that can weather this storm are going to come out on top. I mean, we all know oxygen over here in Kuwait is big enough. It's a mammoth, in the Gulf. So it's, the big box gyms are going to take over from these little boutiques that opened up. I mean, Meg knows about it. We had a lot of boutique gyms open over the last 3 years. And they're all starting to rent out equipment. I can't foresee that lasting that long. And I mean, it just sucks. It really sucks.
Yeah, it's tough. And I mean, there's a lot of things like people don't want to hear. And I think that like we brought Peter Schiff on the show recently, an economist who was kind of like breaking down why, some of these businesses are going to fail, and how, if they couldn't sustain like a 2-month shutdown, then that was already a problem before this even occurred. So
100%.
I think that it's this forced stop is really, it is going to, like any business that had cracks in it, it's going to get exposed, and unfortunately is going to pay the price for that. And so we've seen that too with a lot of Gold's gyms already around in the US have already shut down and laid everybody off. And it's so unfortunate because, I mean, that's one of those staple gym franchises out there that was still doing it for decades. And it just shows like how people were running their operations and how it just wasn't as conservative as they probably should have been in their habits and their saving and the way that they were paying everybody out. So I think it's going to adjust the way that some people look at business going forward, and how they have to have in mind ways to be able to weather through storms and different things that come up from here on out. So yeah, unfortunately, I think there are going to be a lot of businesses that won't exist, but my optimistic side of that is that I hope to see like a new generation of business owners and people come in and with old sound practices that will hopefully be able to, withstand things like this in the future.
Something good comes out of it. It would be nice. It would be nice to see. But I don't know, speaking of something that might come out of it, Justin, I've never really heard you guys talk about kids' fitness. Like it's booming over here where every gym is kind of like trying to attract kids in for fitness. And my theory, I mean, I've been a baseball coach for 15 years, and I was always like, kids should be outside playing. And what's your thoughts on that when they say, all right, your kids need to go to the gym? Kids should be kids, in my opinion. Like,
yeah, no, I share that sentiment. I have noticed the same thing, and I've noticed more boutique gyms that were trying to address that problem. I think that this is a parent problem. Again, more uncomfortable things to talk about, but it starts in the home, right? Like it's the way that you set everything up with your child in terms of their activities, like paying attention for opportunities to get them signed up. And this is why I really loved sports and just outside play and like playgrounds and things like that are just there. They're opportunities for kids to see it and have play. And because they've taken a lot of that out of the schools. And so now parents are in a position where they need to find alternatives to that because a lot of extracurricular activities have been cut. And so it does kind of make sense that they would try and address this with catering to kids and gyms and getting them through like programming. But yeah, it's sort of like I have like a positive and like a negative outlook on it. Like I do see the positive of parents trying to be proactive in seeing that the kids need this activity. They need, structure and ways for them to express their muscles and to try to maintain a healthier weight and like address, because what we're doing right now isn't working and kids are sitting and getting more, it's affecting their posture. They're getting more dysfunction as a result of this. And it's only going to get worse because we're going to keep looking at screens and we're going to keep sitting down in our jobs going, from there. So it's really crucial that this is addressed while kids are still impressionable and will, receive, the intensity of like, it's really important that you move. It's really important that you do all this stuff with your body because you just start to just shut it down. It's one of those things that it starts as a kid. So I'm just very passionate about it as a parent. I see that as if I were to put these up on a totem pole, it's one of the top ones. Like it's paramount for me to get my kids enough exercise and activity throughout the day, because then it helps to address a lot of that energy that they need to expend to then also sit down and learn effectively. So like they really need that. They need that opportunity to get it out and then to really ask them to sit down for that long anyway. Like I was one of those kids. I couldn't sit down and stay still for too long. It's just not how I was wired. And I know I'm not alone. And we've tried to address this with drugs and other things to try and keep the ADD levels down. And I'm just way more passionate about us trying to solve this with movement and really incorporate that somehow within the curriculum. So I get it. The problem though, so to go back to the original thing, so that was like sort of the positive of the parents recognizing that, but the negative to that is that I think that they're trying to offload that work onto somebody else to provide that structure, that sort of value of movement through somebody else in their programming versus them modeling that in the house. And, the kids seeing the parents and their efforts, moving around and exercising and doing these things because it's a core value of theirs.
Yeah, we had the first company that I had worked with when I went out to Kuwait. We had started a kids gym and a program. And it took a while to kind of build it up. But in the end, we ended up shutting it down after a year because we had realized that the majority of our members were either just new parents or not yet parents. And just knowing like what was coming in and the conversations that were happening in that youth gym, it was like, this really starts with the parents. Like we have a huge opportunity with this young population that we have in our other facilities to really educate them. So hopefully when they do start having families, like you said, those values are there and we won't have to teach a 10-year-old how to walk upstairs because they've literally never had to do it before. They can just take the elevator in their house and that's it. Or they don't get out and play sports. I mean, it turned into more of like a babysitting program than an actual fitness program with a lot of those kids. And it didn't work. And the education absolutely had to start with the adults.
Yeah. Unfortunately, And I think I mean, the mentality of it is, well, I've coached kids too, and I actually enjoy it if they're receptive to it and they're in there to learn and they're hungry to learn. But for the most part, a lot of kids, they want to play. They want to do things that are fun, enjoyable, and they have their own agenda. And so to try and wrangle that energy in, I think when they're real young is difficult, but it is something that I always try to then incorporate the parents as much as I can within the sessions. So that way, hopefully that momentum of it like kind of carries into the house and, they can kind of follow up with them on it. But it's good. I mean, it's good that they're trying to address, the problem of it. But yeah, it's definitely way more powerful if the parents model it and they show like how important it is for the kids to keep this up and keep up the exercise in the family.
Absolutely. And the big struggle I think with that in Kuwait right now is the emphasis on fitness for a lot of parent to children is more so on the aesthetic side. It's like after years of now not playing and not modeling that behavior, and now they get to be a teenager, they're getting older, and the pressure and the emphasis really becomes on, well, you're getting fat, you need to work out now because you're too fat, and that's not pretty or that's not socially acceptable. I mean, am I right, Maddie?
It's usually it's usually you're too fat. I think my biggest issue with the whole the kids train that everybody's jumping on over here is that you have unqualified trainers or coaches trying to teach kids complex movements at times, or just not teaching them anything at all. I put my kid in gymnastics thinking he was going to learn gymnastics, and all he learned was nothing. Like I taught him how to do a somersault versus me paying, $300 for him to, some guy to tell him to sit down and not, run around or whatever. And it was like, all right, this is a waste of money. Took him to another gym and they just had him jumping over a box. I'm like, are you shitting me? Like, what are you guys doing here? Where's the skill I'm paying for? That was my biggest thing. Like my kid runs around enough. What do you think of that though? The integrity within that field?
You're going to get a whole variety of different types of coaches and trainers out there. Like unfortunately, this is like one of those things I used to tell people as a personal trainer and would be like shy about telling them that because there was like a little bit of a stigma alongside that. And it was exactly because a lot of people's experience was different. Like they'll get somebody again that will have like a sort of a cookie cutter approach to training. They didn't really learn anything. They were just trying to get them to sweat as much as possible. It was all like about burning calories. And so a lot of times people, and this is all price point too, for a lot of people, with personal training was expensive. And, the more expensive you get, a lot of times the best ones were charging the most. And so people didn't want to do that. And so they would hire a coach that was somewhat reasonable. But I mean, a lot of times you got what you paid for. So the education really wasn't there. And the way that they were coaching wasn't prescriptive. It was more like it was babysitting, or it was like they were just getting through workouts that they tried to be as creative as possible, make them as hard as possible. And that's sort of like the old lean on that button, right? Let's make it really hard so they remember it. And that, and then that's good. Like hard is good. More is better. These are two buttons that have been abused in the industry, like like crazy. So in terms of like, you're going to get that, like there's going to be exposure to one of those types of coaches, trainers versus the other. And unfortunately, there's a lot of really good trainers and coaches out there. I think that they've positioned themselves to sort of address like a niche. And so like I've met a lot of really good coaches and trainers in the sports realm, and they mainly because like they're seeking more very specific information. I think the general public and just trying to lose weight, and like you can get a whole host of characters in that environment. So I did meet a lot of like really qualified, really good coaches and trainers. But for kids, for the most part, like general play, general movement is ideal anyways. Like having a real rigid structure, in my opinion, isn't really that valuable when they're that young. The whole specialization process shouldn't happen until, they start even getting into high school and to college. So This has been echoed from every world-class strength conditioning coach we brought on the show. The importance of general play, like we're putting them in something like you mentioned with gymnastics, or my kids are in parkour, on top of also moving over to little league and basketball and flag football, and I'm rotating them through all these different types of sports activities. I mean, we go hiking, we do all kinds of stuff. And it's really this proprioception we're building. We're getting them really to build and develop their body awareness and their stability and balance and all those types of things. Those are the attributes that we should really be emphasizing the most with kids to then build and develop, a foundation that then we can kind of carry and start to fine tune and specialize as they get older and stronger and more capable.
Do you think part of the American philosophy on sports and what you're talking about, really gives athletes the chance to really flourish when they do hit that peak of specializing in a sport? Like, I know Josh Beckett, pitcher for the Red Sox back in the day, his dad said, you can't, you only touch a baseball during baseball season. You can play soccer, you can play every other sport. And he said that was the best thing because it gave his arm a rest, and it obviously reduced injury and all that stuff, but you see the field from a different plane and you see different sports from a different perspective, and you've got a sports background. So how would you say that's translated to your performance later on? Because you played college football, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I think that it's very important to play other sports and very important to have a diversity in the way that you train, because it will promote more longevity in your performance, especially for these pro athletes too. Like if that's your trajectory, is I want to be a pro athlete, to be more of a well-rounded athlete going into being the most specialized. If I'm throwing a baseball at a young age and you only get so many pitches in your entire career. So, why am I wasting all this? As you're young and still developing and building strength within your body and the way it functions. That's just, to me, that's, something to really consider for longevity purposes, but also being able to move in different directions helps your body to react and to stabilize and to anticipate. A lot of sports in general is about how fast you can react, how quickly you can generate power and force and have control. And so the only way that you're going to get better at that is to present more variables, more options, more scenarios where you're forcing your body to react at a high level and you're challenging it to see where the cracks lie. And so just like anything else, there's going to be, something exposed in basketball that's not going to be exposed just in baseball. And so for your body to be able to also recognize how to jump more effectively, how to soften your landing, how to cut and react laterally, and build up your conditioning and gain all these different attributes and adaptations from other different types of modalities and movements. I think it's crucial to build that into that peak performance. I think that the whole specialization thing is wrong in terms of that's definitely something to consider when we're just talking about one specific skill, but you can also be refining your skill while also building and developing a well-rounded, well-established, stable body that will actually outperform the opposing of just having that one skill to always lean on. So yeah, I think it's very important that the exposure to other modalities, and this is also something that we considered when writing our fitness programs that we promote all the time on our show. And, as three different trainers kind of combining efforts together, the biggest thing for us was trying to keep people moving and progressing forward. That's to keep focusing on something else that's going to stimulate and challenge the body in a new way, which then ends up benefiting the whole. So it's approaching your body from a holistic perspective instead of segmenting it down to just refining this one thing that I can do well.
I love that, because growing up, I swimming was my sport. And when I was younger, I played a few more, but when I got into high school, I had to choose one because seasons kind of conflicted, but also my family was too poor to put me in all the sports. And so I got stuck in that one. And it wasn't until I got to college, and then I had joined swim team just purely from a social perspective at first. But our coach had encouraged us. Our training program was actually way less time in the water than what I was ever used to. And we did things like rock climbing, Pilates, there were Olympic lifting, all of our strength training stuff, but running, and just all kinds of various sports that I was exposed to. He would have us get out and play different games in different sports. And that took me from going on a $700 scholarship, which barely covered a couple books, to being on a full ride by my senior year and a national champion in a couple of events. Like just by, like you said, getting outside of, a lot of swimmers end up shoulder injuries or getting burnt because it's like build up miles in the water and just build up and then taper off. But by exposing us to all these different modalities, it was way better awareness and strength and just like team building, I think, all around. But I think that's huge to definitely expose.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think too, like people need to consider repetitive pattern injuries and things that you constantly do all the time, will inevitably add up into dysfunction. And it's something that this is where I challenged myself. So I've been in the athletic realm for a long time. And then all of a sudden after football and all said and done, like, what do I do now? Like, how do I stay motivated? How do I keep my body from, gaining arthritis and, all this damage I probably occurred through just slamming my body into football all those years. And so I tried to really adjust my training to stay ahead of this. And that's what brought me into mobility training. And this is something that I know I had a hard time really selling this idea to a lot of my clients, a lot of my athletes, especially because it just seems so mundane. It just seems so repetitive and boring. And it didn't have as much impact as weightlifting or, like working on my endurance or one of these other types of skills that are very common amongst athletes. And so to really bring it back down to the quality of my movement and the way that my joints are supposed to articulate and move, I need to maintain those abilities, just like I need to maintain abilities to throw a ball, to move, to walk, to run, to jump. These things are important to me. And to be able to kind of stay ahead of that and keep my joints moving in directions and expressing that is something I became very passionate about because I felt immediately better. Like my shoulder, I had all these problems from heavy lifting, and I get to a certain point bench pressing where my shoulder would just be, oh my God, excruciating pain. And I'm like, okay, well, that's the amount of weight I can get to. And then would just go back and kind of start over again. And to change it up and really start to address my shoulder mobility and see what happened as a result of me regaining stability and function and rotation in my shoulder, how that completely increased my strength. Just bench pressing was super, eye-opening. So that's a whole nother thing to consider even for athletes is that, if you've been doing something for so long, to really consider making sure that the joints are able to go through the full range of motion, go through these rotating articulations, I think is really something that I'm always stressing and making sure that they realize in order to not just do well and perform in your sport, but also to carry with you as a tool to avoid pain and injury. Yeah.
Which definitely does suck. But dude, I mean, that's one thing I loved about MAP's performance was that you guys had the mobility sessions built into there.
Yeah.
And that to me, MAP's performance was the first program I got from you guys years ago. I think that was, I don't even remember when. That was a long time ago. And I'll tell you after the show that what can of worms it opened up. Meg knows Meg knows what I'm talking about. I mean, hell, I could just say it right now, but I don't know, man.
Yeah, that was my baby, man. That was definitely something we all collaborated. That was the first sort of collaboration we had, and I had already written out a bunch of plan. That was something that I applied with a lot of my own athletes and clients previously to that, but then also to get input from Sal and Adam was great. And that was like one of the first we launched together, besides like Sal kind of already had MAPS Anabolic, and that was something that we finally kind of put out there. But then we started to realize, oh, wow, we can collaborate with each other and really enhance and fill all the holes that like were underlying in some of our ideas, creating these things. And so the collective effort was with that program was really cool. So that's great that you got something from it.
Yeah. MAPS Performance, I haven't tried that one yet, but the anabolic was the first one that I went through. And then I ended up using that as like a baseline in creating a lot of programs for like the clients that I was working with. I saw so many benefits to that. And then I could, kind of cater things specifically to what a person needs, their mobility needs and stuff in with that. And I found it led people into the aesthetic program as well after that, like getting exposed to building that strength and building a little bit of that confidence. Like there's just one aesthetic thing I kind of wanted to touch on with you because I know it's a prevalent issue within Kuwait, or maybe it's like, that balance between performance and aesthetic. I guess in my experience, what I found when I keep the goals and the programming things with my clients more performance based, it's, they may come in with an aesthetic goal, but a lot of people, coming in with wanting six packs, and it's like, oh, that's probably the least of, what we should go after first with you. And so keeping their goals performance based, they find that, and we talked a little bit about this with Sal too, they find that the aesthetic hopes, that they're hoping to gain are a byproduct of that. But for a lot of people in Kuwait, we talked about steroid use being pretty prevalent, but there's also a high number of people that have gone through drastic weight loss. Unfortunately, it's typically done through the surgery, but they deal with a lot of loose skin after that and that point. And so I'm curious, like someone who's like drawn to wanting to tighten up their skin, and they may be drawn to a program of something like aesthetic, but do you think going something more of like a performance route or an anabolic route, would that be, something better for starting them off with? Or what kind of advice do you have for someone with a drastic weight loss and being able to tighten their skin again? This could be after pregnancy or maybe after the surgery.
Yeah, I think too, definitely bringing them back to the core of training is building strength. So that's usually where, especially somebody with an aesthetic goal, I think you're right in terms of like bringing them into the performance end of it will produce their desired result as well, like as a byproduct. But I think that just really kind of steering people back to why strength is such a foundational pursuit is very important. This is definitely addressed in our anabolic program. So just for them to learn how to properly apply force and generate what they need in order to lift a substantial amount of weight, which everybody should go through that process and figure out their body on that level. It's going to stimulate your body in a different way than anything else will. And this is something that you will get a pretty ridiculous muscle response if you've never gone through like a 1 to 5 rep range type of a routine where, the entire focus of it is just being able to apply the correct amount of force and being able to generate this and lift a substantial amount of weight and be able to stabilize it. It takes a lot of moving parts to make that happen. And so, plus it's not really advertised that much. I think this is counter to what a lot of people think when they come into the gym about how to change their body and transform their body. They're fed so much bullshit out there with high amounts of reps being the answer, with high intensity plyometrics and things to make things incredibly difficult and, get them fatigued while they work out. And so I think that they're already not as educated as your trainer that's trying to help them out. So it's the trainer's job really to kind of steer them in the right direction and educate them as to the benefits of why something like, a lower rep range might be something to get them to focus on for that particular thing. So I definitely think half the time we're trying to sell people on working out, we're trying to figure out like what does the general population lean on the most. And so we're trying to present something they probably haven't heard before. And so that's why I like something like a MAPS Anabolic is where we tend to steer people to start with, because I think just a lot of people aren't exposed to that type of training and how different it is and what that's going to do for their body that's going to respond like it's never responded before. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it definitely does. I think strength training is a great parallel. I think ultimately, like, someone chasing aesthetics, it's typically confidence is what they're chasing. And I think strength training is a great parallel to be able to build that. I know that with, anytime I've led groups and people through this, it's the biggest outcomes that they talk about. They're great. They feel toned and they feel stronger, but a lot of them are like, oh, I feel confident now, and even cutting toxic people out of my life or having big conversations, or I want to go back to school and study this. Like it just brings this whole new level of confidence that I think that they get just by getting more in touch and inside their body. And I think it brings out that confidence and those other pretty things that they're chasing.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think if you can like show them tangibles too, I think the aesthetic side of thinking when you're going in to train, it gets to a point where I don't know if you ever really feel that satisfied. You don't feel the progress as much. And it's very much of a mental game that you're constantly playing, looking at the mirror. Like, did I eat too much? Did I get a good enough pump? Like all these things, like is my body looking like good in these clothes?
And that's something I think to touch on. Like, I think that gets attributed mostly to women, especially in Kuwait as well, I would say. But I like that you touch on it too. I think you guys have done this in your episodes a few times, but talking about the body image issues that men can have as well. And so knowing that aesthetics can be, somewhat of a head game for them too.
Oh, absolutely. I've had plenty of male clients and myself included. Like I avoid, on the show, I'm probably the least motivated by aesthetics. And I've tried to make that clear. And they give me shit about it all the time. And we kind of, we go pretty hard on that just because it's the gift that keeps giving for them. But I do care about my aesthetics. I do care about being able to fill up my shirts and to be able to, my wife care about like how big my chest is and my arms and, these things that like I am conscious of that. Like I'm conscious of how it's affecting my body. And if my muscles are coming through and I have definition and, things like that. So, but I look at it more definitely from a performance perspective, but guys do have plenty of insecurities and plenty of things that drive them into the gym that are aesthetically driven. Like there's a lot of times it's they're not big enough or, they don't have big enough arms. They don't have big enough calves. They're not shredded enough because the thing is, they'll notice like one of their friends that gets a lot of attention and lots of reward from that, right? Like and girls respond to that. And so this becomes like a thing that looks like it's valuable. And so there's definitely motivation there to come in and try and get as big or shredded as possible. And like, how do I do this the quickest way possible? I've encountered that countless times, even with men. So I think that humans in general, it's definitely a status thing, right? If you have a very noticeably like crazy physique, you've put a lot of like effort into and built, like you should get like some sort of recognition for that because it's a really like tough thing to do, but it can definitely be a negative motivator as well, which you could turn into an obsession that you just can't shake. So there's a balance there, I think, with, maintaining a good, healthy physique, but also not being completely consumed by letting that dictate whether or not I hang out with my family or I go to these events or I spend time on my relationship and my girlfriend or whatever. Like these things can quickly affect everything if you're so self-centered all the time.
Well, I will put in a request for calf training specifically for the oxygen men out there. There's a severe lack.
All Kuwaiti men.
Severe lack in lower leg strength.
That is all Kuwaiti men. It's genetics. It is not a lack in lower leg strength. All right. Please give us
all right, Maddie, let it go.
Are you?
I won't feed into that complex.
Struggle?
Sorry.
Okay. See, that's one I can at least rib those guys on a bit. And that's like, again, genetic wise, yeah, it's the roll of the dice. Like it's funny because I put like little to no effort and I did do a lot of jump rope and explosive movement and all that stuff through sports, but like I never put isolating emphasis on my calves. That just wasn't a thing. And meanwhile, Sal and Adam are doing a million calf raises at the end of every workout, hoping for the best and just gaining a few more veins. So
calf raises are heavy in some of those programs.
Oh yeah. And you know where that's coming from. That's not coming from me. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Dude, another question. I mean, all right, since you guys talked about MAPS Anabolic, what would you follow that up with? Would you follow that up with MAPS Strong or MAPS Performance? Like, what would be a good bet for a beginner if they started out with anabolic? Would you say move on to MAPS Strong or Performance? I mean, I like MAPS Strong. I haven't tried it yet. It's on my to-do list once I stop, the program I'm doing now. So,
oh, you're gonna love it, dude. Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely say MAPS Performance. So we actually considered when we were like writing these together, like how they would interact with each other. And we really we stacked them as MAPS Anabolic, MAPS Performance, then Aesthetic for a specific reason, mainly to take people through these like adaptations that will kind of refocus their body to respond in different ways. And so the emphasis with MAPS Performance is on movement. And I just feel like for me, a lot of it was trying to help, a lot of the gym bros out there and a lot of your typical person that would come into the gym and just kind of hop on machines and worry about getting a good pump and, all these aesthetic things, but they just really weren't moving in multiple directions. And I've actually other trainers even that I've worked with that had great physiques, but they just had like terrible movement and they couldn't even raise their shoulder all the way over their head. And I'm just like, this is crazy. Like they look awesome, but they just move like shit. And this is going to haunt them later. And so MAPS Performance was great for that because it's funny because I've gotten the most complaints and also the most praise with that program because it's so different. It's very, very different from your regular kind of commercial gym setting workout. It forces you to move, with all these mobility sessions, which we included kind of in between the foundational session. But also when we were programming this, I was programming like I would program an athlete in the off season. So there's rhyme and reason to, in the beginning, focusing on the explosive compound lifts and then kind of transitioning into multiplanar movement and getting strong in multiple directions. And then after that, we're going to go into like a more power, like speed power and then explosive power and then conditioning. And so it's sort of like would lead you up into the peak, back into getting into the season where you could express all these new attributes that you just acquired. So now for your average person, what does that mean? It's really about kind of taking your body through a journey and experiencing new ways to address like underlying issues that you didn't know were issues. Then you may find are challenging and you can get stronger in, but it's a completely different experience. So, moving left to right and then getting strong in that is something I feel like everybody should have that. And it's going to help your knees, going to help your hips, going to help your ankles. And it also, you get the benefit of gaining muscle from that. So, you're going to be more balanced, more well-rounded, more symmetrical. So if you're very much more like aesthetic focused, it still provides a way to fill holes in your physique to really help, enhance the look and the fullness of your muscle and have that symmetrical, balanced, athletic physique. So, and this is kind of how we have to sell that to somebody who's a little bit more aesthetic driven because it's hard. There's a lot of movements in there that you just feel like I suck at this. Like I'm not good rotating and moving my body in this direction. And that's okay. Like don't overload it. Just treat every one of those movements like its own unique skill. And then it's going to translate to what you're normally comfortable with and what your program used to look like. When you go do that again, like watch how strong and stable your lifts are. And it's incredible. So I feel it's really important for people to go through this journey of doing stuff to really build up your overall strength, but then challenging that in multiple directions. And then the aesthetic side is really where now we've built a good solid foundation that's stable and the joints are all accounted for. Now let's really try to enhance the look, the fullness, and the presentation of your physique, if that's your desired outcome, right? Is to take your shirt off or, be in a bikini and go on stage or just go to the beach or whatever. Just look your best that you've ever looked. This is kind of like why we stacked those 3 programs in that alignment, the way that we did that. And so with Maps Strong, that was something that was like sort of another addition to the performance side of the spectrum to really enhance grip strength, upper back strength, really like the overall work capacity is the word I'm looking for. So work capacity, meaning I could carry objects, I could do things my motor is bigger, so I could work hard longer. And so like Map Strong really is like a great program for that. If you're any kind of an athlete where you're having to move heavy objects or like you have to do explosive things for a long period of time, that program really challenges that and helps you get stronger in that direction. So we try to address like little niche pursuits as well with our different programs that we have out. But for the most part, I think those 3 programs, that's like our core. We try to get everybody at least go through that once or twice. And then you can look at the accessory type programs that'll help kind of take you to more of the specialization side. So it emulates what we talked about earlier. It's building overall strength and support. And then like, what are you most interested in? Why don't you go play around and develop that skill even further? We have an answer for you. So that's kind of like how we developed our map system.
Out of that, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, I love hearing that thought process behind those, the method sort of the madness of those. It makes me motivated, kind of want to go back and do it right this time. I love that. But I've got to drop off for another meeting. Justin, you can continue with Maddie, but it was so great to get to hear from you and learn from you. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, it was great to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
All right. I'll check you guys later.
Dude. I mean, the thought process behind that is awesome. And I love how you guys have broken down the programming process. And like I said, I started with Maps Performance and, it took me to other places. And thank you guys. Like you guys have been turning out some awesome programs. You guys put out a lot of good content, especially on YouTube. Like you guys, where does a lot of that come from? Especially with the creativity that you guys have when demonstrating some of this stuff.
Oh yeah. No, that's funny because we're all visionaries. It's actually like both a blessing and a curse. So we probably have the most fun in the creative process. We had found the best way to do that. We would actually create rituals to get ourselves all kind of in this same thought process, this creative mindset. So we would drive to a location. We'd get like a VRBO somewhere and we'd all stay there. And just on the way up from the studio, we'd drive and it was like chaos. Like we would just have ideas of whatever we were thinking initially that we wanted to create. It would always turn into something completely different by the time we came back. So it's funny. There's no shortage of ideas within the 3, even 4 of us with Doug. So it was about being able to corral that and to then take all those ideas, put it in a package, shoot it, and then get a lot more organized along the way. So I think our Achilles heel has been organization through this whole development of this company and what we've been trying to get better at. So the ideas and the creativity, I think we all just naturally, that's something that each one of us share. And then when we combine that together, it's explosive. So it's really a unique thing to find 2 other guys that kind of share the same, intensity in terms of like their love for creating something new. And, we can refine ideas down to a more presentable form that people like your average person could understand more. So, with the YouTube, that's been the ultimate feedback with how to refine ideas and present them in a more simplistic fashion. So we take out a lot of big words. We try and reduce the time it takes you to explain something. And we want to make something as relatable as possible. So that's just been years of trying to refine the way we talk about things. And the podcast helps a lot with that because we hash out ideas constantly and we sort of round robin discuss things. And then also taking that into specific exercises. How can we create better cues for this? How can we show better camera angles? You know, there's a lot of thought that goes into every one of these pieces of content we put out. I think we have a little bit of power in numbers with that. So it is a bit of an advantage. I'm not going to lie, having multiple people all trying to work on similar things. So that's been kind of a superpower of ours that we've been able to use.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. And one thing that I do love about you guys is your overall branding, you know, the whole stay authentic. But I really wanted to ask you about Cup Zero. Where the hell did that come from, dude? That was like the best thing I've ever fucking heard in my life, man. And that was just like, bam. And I was like, dude, that was like the strongest phrase I've ever heard about coffee.
That's so funny. Yeah, that's so random. It's just pure randomness. You know, what's the funny part about being on the podcast and just letting it rip and not being like super organized and planned out. It allows for opportunities of just you to just put out there whatever's on your mind. And so that was just like stream of consciousness, like, Cup Zero, like what? Nobody else calls it Cup Zero. Like in my own mind, like I feel like somebody's already said that. And it's just been, it's like an idea that everybody shares, but definitely wasn't a thing. And then to hear people like respond to that and be like, yeah, like totally, like that first cup is nothing. Like that doesn't do anything for me. I'm like, I know, like I just have to get it in as quick as possible. And then I'm going to go get my real cup and start my day. And so anyway, it's just funny because it's funny to see how people relate to different things that make us all tick. And that's definitely one thing of mine. I'm not a morning person. It's really a struggle for me to get my motor running in the morning. And I work on that all the time, but coffee has helped. It's really been a help for me. and it's a hack. And I know I'm not alone, and I'm not alone. And so now to see that people are, you know, kind of share that with me is pretty fun. So yeah, that's where that came from. It was just literally just off the cuff. Cup Zero, it kind of took off and was a thing of its own. And it was pretty funny to watch.
I mean, dude, thank you so much again for coming on here. I don't want to take up any more of your time. It was a true honor and a privilege to actually
it's my pleasure,
here,
man.
Dude. And stick around as soon as I hit the end of this recording, because there's something I want to tell you after this that I don't want to say on air. Yeah. And I'll leave all the listeners hanging, and they can just DM me, and I'll probably tell them later on.
You guys miss out.
I know, right? But dude, seriously, thank you so much. And the whole team for the Project Kuwait would like to thank you guys, because you really, I think you revolutionized podcasting in the Middle East. I don't think you guys know what you've done, but you opened up Pandora's box, so to speak, where we've started this, where we have a Psyched with Dr. D show on Tuesdays, where we're starting to bring up a lot of taboo subjects in the Middle East. And, you know, we're just plugging.
That's exciting. That's exciting, man. You
guys kind of had a hand in starting this. When I went to Megan, our old partner, with the idea, it was sort of like, all right, you know what? They kind of, MindPump laid the foundation for something like this, and we got to do something in the Middle East that's similar, that kind of breaks down the barriers that the local market puts up. And again, we were the first podcast, or the first people to ever swear live, swear on a podcast. So,
wow.
I take pride.
So cool. Dude, so rock and roll, man. You guys are punk rock. Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
I love it.
Thank you, man. Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it, dude.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for listening, supporting us and all that. Like, I love hearing these stories, and it's crazy to hear that somehow we inspired, people like you guys out there to do that. Cause it's just, that's everything to us. We just wanted to see who else out there thought like we did, and wanted to kind of share good information with everybody and get them to stop reading all the nonsense out there. So I appreciate you guys as well, man. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. You can also find us on Instagram at The Project Kuwait. Thank you, and join us next time.